Red states pass anti-riot laws protecting drivers who inadvertently hit rioters, all as leftists are freaking out. In this video, we're going to take a look at what one paper calls the tsunami of legislation that's being passed across the nation to fight back against rioters, how that legislation is particularly protecting motorists who unintentionally hit demonstrators blocking roads, and how even the Olympics have had it with athletes exploiting their platform for political protests. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Wonderful to be with you. As always, we're here to give you each and every single day conservative hope in the midst of these turbulent and trying times, helping to think better so you can feel better and provide for you a patriot path to freedom. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Now, before we begin, how would you like to make blackouts a thing of the past? Well, now you can with what are called power light bulbs. They're really amazing. Get this. These are light bulbs that light up automatically in the event of a power outage. I'm not kidding. Power light bulbs eliminates blackouts from your life forever, and it gives you peace of mind during an emergency or natural disaster. They work like normal bulbs, but they're self-charging. They have backup emergency batteries that automatically keep your house lit when a power outage is detected. It's really amazing stuff. And all you got to do is just click on that link below right now, and you're going to get the power light bulb for up to 67% off. Or you could just go to their website. It's powerlightbulb.com and eliminate blackouts from your life today. All right, let's dive right in here, gang. The leftist activists disguised as journalists over at the New York Times and the British Guardian, they are absolutely livid today. They're furious. And do you know what's got them blowing their top? No, it's not all the riots and protests and violences surrounding the latest police-involved shootings. Nope, nope, nope. That's not it. What's driving particularly the New York Times bananas is the attempt by Republican red states to actually fight back and do something about these riots. That's what's got the New York Times up in arms. Look at this headline. GOP bills target protesters and absolve motorists who hit them. And the byline reads, as the nation reacts to the guilty verdict a jury handed to Derek Chauvin in the killing of George Floyd, Republican-led states are introducing punitive new measures governing protests. Or take this one from the British leftists who disguise themselves as journalists over at The Guardian. Republicans push tsunami of harsh anti-protest laws after BLM rallies. And the byline reads, critics say the bills introduced across the country would infringe free speech rights and disproportionately target people of color. And if you read between the lines here, what you'll conclude is that the leftist activists disguised as journalists over at The Guardian, over at the New York Times, they're actually upset that Republican legislatures in states like Oklahoma and Iowa and Florida are actively taking their law enforcement responsibilities seriously. Note, neither The Guardian nor the New York Times expressed even the remotest of concern about the hundreds, if not thousands, of Democrat city council members and mayors across the nation that deliberately abdicated their law enforcement responsibilities over the past summer. That was fine. There was nothing wrong, and there was not only nothing wrong with it, it should be lauded. That should be praised in allowing these, as CNN put it, these fiery but mostly peaceful protests. They should be praised, these legislators, to allow them to take place, to bring awareness to all of this social justice and this systemic racism that inflicts our nation. You may recall last summer, Democrat-dominated city councils like the one in Seattle actually threatened their mayor, Jenny Durkin, with impeachment if she didn't openly side with the rioters and looters. Did either the New York Times or the Guardian so much as raise the slightest semblance of critical concern over that deliberate abdication of law enforcement responsibility? Of course not. No, they championed the riots. The leftist activists at the Guardian, the New York Times cheerleaded the riots. The protests. That's the only word we're allowed to use, right? The anti-racism protests, I forgot. These papers champion the anti-racist protests over these last several months. So obviously they're going to be very, very disappointed with the GOP for standing up to the protesters. Now, unfortunately for the cultural Marxists over the New York Times and The Guardian, there are 75 million Americans who want nothing to do with their fiery but mostly peaceful protests. We, the 75 million Americans who proudly voted for President Trump, we actually hold our legislators and governors accountable for faithfully upholding their law enforcement responsibilities. And that goes double when it comes to out-of-control, far-left, ideologically inspired riots. And that's what these laws are all about. They're about protecting law-abiding folk from violent rioters. And I'm glad to report that a number of red states are rising up to the challenge and pushing back against all of the social insanity for which the New York Times and the mainstream media as a whole have become such reliable cheerleaders. Let's start with Oklahoma. Governor Kevin Stitt has just signed into law a bill that protects drivers who unintentionally injure or even kill demonstrators from any liability, while at the same time, the new law subjects rioters and protesters who block roadways to jail time and hefty fines. What do you think about that? So if you want to block roads and harass motorists, maybe you want to go to a blue state. They'll be happy to have you. New York Times will be happy to have you, but not a red state like Oklahoma. From now on, obstruction of a public street, highway, or road will now constitute a misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in a county jail and fees as high as $5,000. Anyone who commits the offense will be liable for damages incurred. That, my friends, is what's going on in Oklahoma. Over to Iowa. The Iowa House has just passed a bill that would provide new lawsuit protection for police officers, as well as increased penalties for rioting and destroying public property. It too will protect motorists who unintentionally hit rioters and demonstrators blocking highways and hold the protesters accountable for all damages. Going on over to Indiana, a bill is being considered in the Senate that would bar anyone convicted of unlawful assembly from holding state employment, including elected office. And in Minnesota, a bill is being proposed that would disqualify protesters convicted of an offense from eligibility for student loans. And perhaps the king of them all, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, has signed into law what is being called a comprehensive anti-riot bill that cracks down against mass civil unrest. DeSantis has called the bill the strongest anti-looting, anti-rioting, pro-law enforcement piece of legislation in the entire nation. And we should mention that it too includes immunity for motorists who inadvertently drive through protesters blocking roads. Altogether, GOP lawmakers in 34 states have introduced 81 anti-riot bills during the 2021 legislative session, and the left is literally beside themselves. The mainstream media is trying to do everything they possibly can do to portray this as a bunch of white supremacist Republicans trying to persecute peaceful protests against racial injustice. But that's not how the vast majority of the population here, particularly these red states, see it, that's for sure. Virtually all the polls that have come out in the last few months have shown that Americans have had it with these so-called protests. In fact, the polls were plunging by the end of last summer. In September of last year, an AP poll found that approval of the protests had dropped from 54% in June to just 39%. The same goes for BLM. The Daily News UK reported on a poll right around the same time as the AP poll that found that support for BLM dropped to just 39% from a high of 54% just weeks prior to the poll. The simple fact of the matter is that while most Americans are very concerned about injustices and social inequities and the like, they don't believe burning down cities and eliminating police departments is the answer. Surprise! While most Americans are perfectly willing to share concerns about people feeling like they're not being treated equally, those same Americans aren't radical cultural Marxists ready to overturn all of our social institutions because they're supposedly irredeemably racist and bigoted. In other words, the vast majority of the American public does not share the radical leftist sentiments of BLM activists, Antifa agitators, or New York Times so-called journalists. They simply don't go there. And these radical activists look more and more like they're going to continue to burn down our nation, then most Americans are going to support state legislators standing up and doing something about that and pushing back against all of this insane lawlessness. Sorry, far left, most Americans like their police officers. All the polls show it. And they've got a limit. They really have a limit as to how much of these protests they're willing to tolerate. I don't know if you saw this, but even the Olympics Committee is clamping down on all of this. Podium protests have been officially banned at both the Tokyo Olympics and the Beijing Winter Games after 2/3 of the athletes polled said that they believed it was not appropriate to demonstrate or express political views on the victory podium, field of play, or at official ceremonies. So sorry, New York Times, you threw your whole lot in with the rioters. I mean looters. I mean protesters. But the rest of us, and indeed as it looks like most of the world, wants nothing to do with the protesters. And most certainly, we want nothing to do with you. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, subscribe to my channel. Definitely click on the link below and check out some of our awesome merch. And you definitely want to check out my latest video. I just uploaded it. It's on how NBA star LeBron James faces a massive backlash after posting an online threat against a police officer who saved a young girl's life. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.